The Sonoran Desert, sprawling and relentless, stretched endlessly beneath a sky of pale blue, blistering in the unforgiving heat. The earth beneath was cracked like a shattered mirror, with deep fissures revealing the toll of months without rain. Temperatures hovered above 110 degrees Fahrenheit by midday, turning the air into shimmering waves of heat that danced just above the sun-baked sand and thorny creosote bushes. The scent of dry earth mingled with the faint sharpness of mesquite and the dusty aroma of brittle ocotillo branches, their skeletal forms reaching toward the scorching sky. In this vast, sun-drenched wilderness, survival was an art of patience, resilience, and quiet strength. Among the sparse shadows cast by towering saguaros, a small figure moved carefully, almost hesitantly. A bobcat kitten, no older than 3 months, his tawny fur dusted with the desert's earth tones, pressed close to the ground, his amber eyes flickering with cautious curiosity and deep, dignified endurance. Unlike the wild calls and frantic movements of many desert creatures, his presence was a study in stillness, each step measured, each breath steady, yet labored. This kitten was different. Weakened by a drought that had stolen the abundance his mother once relied on, he could no longer follow her as swiftly as before. The slow hunger gnawed at his belly, but he bore it with quiet dignity, never begging, never complaining. His body was thin, ribs barely hidden beneath soft fur, muscles slack where strength should have thrived. Yet his eyes held something fierce, a silent resolve to survive, to endure without surrendering to despair. Far away at the edge of this unforgiving landscape, Elena wiped a bead of sweat from her brow and peered out across the dusty horizon. Her worn boots pressed into the cracked soil as she adjusted the strap of her pack, the faint rustle of dried brush accompanying her every careful step. Years of working with desert wildlife had taught her to see what others missed. The faint tracks in the sand, the subtle broken twigs that hinted at movement, the barely audible scuffle of paws on gravel. But today there was something different in the air, a stillness that carried weight, a secret whispered by the desert winds. Elena's heart clenched, not just from the sun's relentless heat, but from a quiet worry she couldn't quite shake. Months ago, she had lost her younger brother to illness. The pain was still fresh, a silent ache beneath her calm exterior. Her grief was a shadow she carried, much like the desert shadows that stretched longer with the fading sun. Now, she found herself drawn into another story of quiet struggle, not unlike her own. What she didn't yet know was that somewhere near the rocky washes, a small bobcat kitten was fighting a battle of his own, a slow starvation that showed no obvious signs, but whispered through every labored breath, every faltering step. The drought had hardened the desert's heart. Water sources, once reliable, had vanished, forcing creatures like the bobcat and his mother to stretch their limits in search of sustenance. Prey was scarce. The usual small mammals and birds had retreated or perished under the relentless sun. The kitten's mother moved ahead, eyes sharp and vigilant, but the kitten lagged behind, his body betraying the strength he so desperately tried to summon. And yet, he did not call out. Not with cries or frantic noises. His suffering was silent, dignified, a quiet endurance that spoke volumes about the delicate balance between life and the harsh realities of nature. Have you ever felt that kind of silent struggle, when everything inside you aches, but the world remains unaware? It's a burden carried not just by animals in the wild, but by many among us, hidden stories unfolded. And beneath the surface, Elena's boots crunched softly on the dry earth as she paused to take in the scene, the sun beginning its slow descent, casting long golden shadows over the rugged landscape. The desert, though harsh, held an undeniable beauty in this fading light. The scent of warm sand mixed with creosote, the distant call of a cactus wren, and the subtle hum of cicadas created a symphony of quiet life, persistent even in scarcity. In this moment of stillness, the stage was set. a tiny bobcat kitten, too weak to follow his mother, carrying a weight unseen, and a woman whose own quiet pain would soon draw her into a journey of trust, healing, and transformation. Before we continue, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments and join this shared journey of witnessing the unseen. The early morning light spilled softly across the Sonoran desert, turning every grain of sand and every leaf of creosote into a small jewel shimmering with dew. The sky was a pale wash of lavender and gold, the air cool but heavy with the promise of midday heat. A gentle breeze stirred the brittle brush, carrying with it the faint, earthy scent of rain that had not come in weeks. Somewhere, hidden among the rugged folds of the land, life quietly persevered. The bobcat kitten lay nestled beneath the shade of a sprawling mesquite tree, its twisted limbs stretching wide like ancient arms, sheltering the fragile life below. His small body was curled tight, ears twitching at the faintest sounds, the rustle of a lizard skittering over sun-warmed rocks, the distant flutter of a quail taking flight. Though his breaths were shallow, his eyes were alert, reflecting the muted colors of the desert dawn. In his stillness there was an unspoken wisdom, as if he carried the desert's ancient stories in his silent watchfulness. Around him, the desert stirred to life in subtle ray. TMs, the soft crunch of a pack rat's footsteps on cracked earth, the brief splash of a hummingbird's wings as it dipped toward a hidden blossom. These sounds wove together like a quiet symphony, evidence of an ecosystem that thrived in balance, even amid hardship. Yet the kitten's presence was fragile, a delicate thread woven into this vast tapestry. Biologically, bobcat kittens at this age begin to hone their hunting instincts, practicing the stealth and patience that will one day make them skilled predators. But this kitten, weakened by the drought's cruel hand, had yet to fully develop the strength needed to stalk and pounce. His muscles, though lean, lacked the usual spring. His eyes, sharp but weary, searched the shadows for signs of his mother's return. His survival depended on both instinct and hope. In the quiet of the desert, the kitten's body language spoke volumes. His tail flicked occasionally, a sign of alertness mingled with uncertainty. His ears, normally perked with confidence, drooped slightly, subtle signals of his diminished vitality. Yet, beneath these signs of weakness, there was an enduring spark, a silent refusal to yield. This before moment, the stillness before the storm, held a fragile beauty. It was a snapshot of resilience in its purest form, the natural world quietly teaching the value of endurance and patience. The desert was not just a backdrop. It was an active participant in this story, shaping every breath, every movement. Elena watched from a distance, careful not to disturb the fragile balance. Her eyes took in the expanse, the jagged cliffs painted with early sunlight, the scattered cacti standing sentinel against the blue sky, and the tiny creature hiding in plain sight. The harshness of the environment was tempered by this intimate connection to life, vulnerable yet enduring. She thought about the drought, how it stripped away abundance and forced all living things to stretch their limits. The bobcat's struggle was a silent testament to nature's uncompromising demands. Yet it was also a reminder that even in scarcity, life finds a way to persist. As the sun climbed higher, the desert heat began to thicken, pressing down with an invisible weight. The kitten shifted slightly, his paws sinking into the warm sand. Instinct urged him to move, to follow the scent of his mother, but his weakened legs trembled beneath him. He paused, eyes scanning the horizon, as if weighing the impossible choice between movement and rest. In this moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath, a stillness that carried the weight of unseen battles, quiet endurance, and unspoken hope. Have you ever witnessed a moment so subtle, yet so full of meaning that it lingers long after? A silent story told not in words, but in breath, posture, and the slow turning of the world. Here, in the desert's soft light, The bobcat kitten waited, not just for his mother, but for a future still uncertain, a future shaped by patience, resilience, and the gentle touch of unexpected kindness. The bobcat kitten's amber eyes held a depth that belied his small size, reflecting not just the desert's harsh light, but an ancient wisdom whispered through generations. Beneath his tawny fur, lean muscles rippled with the cautious grace of a predator still learning the delicate dance between stealth and survival. He was young, no more than 3 months old, but carried himself with a quiet dignity, each movement measured, deliberate, born of instinct and a budding resilience that refused surrender. As dawn gave way to morning, the desert's stillness allowed a rare intimacy with this tiny creature's world. He crouched low beneath a brittle creosote bush, his sharp claws pressing lightly into the sandy soil as his keen nose twitched, catching scents carried on a dry breeze. Every twitch of his whiskers, every flick of his ears was a silent conversation with the environment, alert, wary, yet undeniably connected. Biologically, bobcats are solitary and fiercely independent creatures. Even at this tender age, the kitten exhibited traits that would one day make him a formidable hunter: acute night vision, padded paws for silent movement, and a keen sense of hearing that could detect the faintest rustle of prey. Yet now, weakened by the relentless drought, he was forced into a delicate balance between the wildness encoded in his DNA and the vulnerability of his fragile state. His mother, a silent shadow in the distance, was both protector and teacher. She had taught him to navigate this arid landscape, to recognize the subtle signs of water, the patterns of prey, the rhythms of predator and prey alike. But the drought had stretched her resources thin, and the kitten's strength was not keeping pace. His legs faltered as he tried to follow her across rocky ridges and dry washes. He could not call out, not without drawing unwanted attention, so he endured in silence. There was an ancient dignity in his quiet suffering. He did not whimper or panic. Instead, he embodied a deep patience that mirrored the desert itself, enduring, observing, waiting. His eyes held a contemplative stillness, as though he understood that his struggle was part of a larger story, a cycle of loss and renewal whispered through the wind. In these moments, the bobcat was not just a creature of instinct, but a being with a silent inner life. His thoughts might have traced the same fears and hopes that any creature, human or animal, knows. The ache of loneliness, the yearning for safety, the flicker of hope in uncertain times. He was both wild and tender, fierce and fragile. Elena, observing from a distance, felt a stirring within her, a profound recognition of this creature's silent strength. She had spent years caring for desert wildlife, but few moments had touched her so deeply as watching this small bobcat, his resilience shining quietly beneath the weight of hardship. She imagined the kitten's inner world, the cautious hope, the guarded trust, the fierce will to survive. The desert around them was alive with subtle signs of life and struggle. A roadrunner darted across the cracked earth, its feathers ruffling in the morning breeze. The scent of sage and mesquite mingled with the dry warmth of sun-baked sand. Light played across the kitten's fur, dappling him in golden shadow, as if nature itself were acknowledging his silent journey. The kitten's body language spoke a language of survival and wisdom. His tail twitched gently, a sign of cautious curiosity mingled with alertness. His ears, pointed and finely tuned, rotated toward distant sounds, perhaps the faint rustle of a rabbit or the call of a distant hawk. Every movement was both instinct and adaptation, a dance with the unforgiving environment that shaped him. Yet despite his solitude, there was a quiet grace in his being, a reminder that even in the harshest places, life carries beauty, strength, and hope. The bobcat's silent resilience was not just about enduring hardship, it was about embodying a wisdom beyond words, a lesson in patience and dignity. This was his world, a place of stark contrasts, where life was fragile yet persistent, where silence spoke volumes, and where every breath was a testament to the quiet courage of survival. Have you ever paused to witness such silent strength, to see wisdom reflected in eyes that do not speak but understand everything? Here, in the heart of the Sonoran Desert, the Bobcat kitten story was just beginning, a story woven from stillness, resilience, and the quiet power of enduring against the odds. The sun climbed steadily toward its zenith, painting the desert in harsh, unforgiving light. The heat pressed down like an invisible weight, distorting the distant hills with shimmering waves that danced upon the cracked earth. In this relentless glare, the bobcat kitten moved with careful deliberation, each step more labored than the last. His lean frame was a fragile vessel bearing a quiet hunger, one that no desperate cry could capture, no frantic whimper could reveal. Starvation was a slow companion, creeping in unnoticed by most. It seeped into his muscles, draining strength with each passing day, leaving behind a hollow ache wrapped in silent perseverance. The kitten's amber eyes, once bright with youthful curiosity, now carried a dullness born from fatigue and the gnawing emptiness within. Yet even as his body weakened, his spirit clung stubbornly to the instinctual will to survive. This hunger was unlike the frantic urgency of a sudden threat. It was a patient, lingering ache, a quiet erosion of vitality. The kitten's ribs pressed faintly beneath his tawny fur, each breath a shallow whisper against the heat-baked silence. He paused beneath the scant shade of a cholla cactus, tongue flicking briefly to moisten cracked lips. Despite his frailty, he scanned the horizon with unwavering alertness, attuned to every subtle movement of the desert's hidden life. Scientifically, bobcats are solitary hunters whose survival depends on stealth, strength, and precise timing. For a kitten so young, these skills are honed slowly, nurtured by maternal guidance and practice. Yet the drought had shattered this natural rhythm. Prey had become scarce. The once plentiful rabbits and rodents had retreated or perished beneath the unyielding sun. Each hunt that failed tightened the knot of hunger inside the kitten's belly. Yet he refused to surrender to despair. In the silence between movements, the kitten's body spoke a language of quiet endurance. His tail twitched with restless energy, a subtle sign of stress and hunger. His ears, finely tuned to desert sounds, flicked toward the distant call of a raven, a harsh reminder that the desert's ecosystem was both predator and prey, life and death intertwined. Every instinct urged him to move faster, to push harder, but his fragile legs trembled beneath the weight of exhaustion. The kitten's inner experience was one of dignified suffering. He bore his hunger without complaint, embodying a quiet resilience that mirrored the ancient desert itself, unyielding, patient, enduring. There was no frantic panic in his gaze, no desperate pleas. Instead, there was a solemn acceptance, a silent promise to endure whatever it took to live another day. Elena, watching from a careful distance, felt the weight of this invisible struggle settle over her like the desert heat. She had learned to read the subtle signs of suffering in the wild, the way a creature moves, the flicker of its eyes, the tension in its posture. The kitten's slow starvation was a whispered tragedy, one that carried a profound dignity. It was not just hunger for food, but a hunger for survival, for trust, for connection. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on Elena's mind. To intervene meant to risk disrupting the delicate balance of the desert's ecosystem. To stand aside was to watch a fragile life slip quietly toward death. There were no easy answers. The line between compassion and respect for nature's course was thin and tangled. Yet beneath the surface of this quiet crisis, hope flickered like a distant star. The kitten's refusal to give in, his steady gaze scanning the horizon, spoke of an unspoken courage. Healing, she reminded herself, often begins in silence and stillness, not with loud declarations or frantic rescues, but with patient presence and trust. As the desert sun reached its peak, the kitten shifted, his paws leaving faint imprints in the dry soil. Each mark was a testament to endurance, a quiet story written in sand and sweat. The slow hunger pressed on, but so did he, unyielding, unseen, and yet profoundly alive. Have you ever carried a silent burden, one that no one around you noticed, yet you bore with quiet strength? This kitten's journey reminds us that dignity can exist even in suffering, and hope can grow in the most unlikely places. In the vast stillness of the Sonoran Desert, a fragile life persisted. A small bobcat kitten, holding fast to survival with the quiet courage of those who face hardship without a single cry. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the dusty outskirts of Tucson, where Elena's modest home sat, nestled among the resilient desert scrub. The fading light filtered softly through worn curtains, warming the room with a gentle golden glow. Shelves lined with wildlife guides, rehabilitation supplies, and photographs of rescued creatures bore silent witness to years of care and dedication. Yet beneath this quiet sanctuary, Elena carried an invisible weight, one forged by loss, longing, and the unspoken hope that her efforts might heal not only broken animals, but also her own fractured heart. Her hands moved methodically, preparing a small container of specially formulated kitten formula. Though experienced and steady, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her face, a subtle tightening around her eyes that no one would see unless they looked closely. The recent death of her younger brother still echoed within her, a deep ache that no passage of time had fully softened. Caring for injured desert wildlife was both a refuge and a reminder, a way to give purpose to grief, to offer tenderness where loss had left emptiness. Elena's connection to this harsh, sun-baked land was profound. Born and raised in Tucson, she had grown alongside the desert's shifting rhythms. Her family's roots were intertwined with the indigenous traditions of the Tohono O'odham people, who revered the desert's creatures as sacred keepers of balance and spirit. This cultural heritage shaped Elena's approach to wildlife, marked by respect, humility, and an understanding that intervention must be gentle, measured, and mindful of the delicate web of life. Today, a quiet urgency pressed beneath her calm exterior. Reports from local rangers spoke of unusual bobcat sightings near the dry washes, a mother struggling with a weakened kitten. Elena's heart tightened at the thought. Her own pain mirrored in that fragile life. She felt an unspoken call to help. Yet the ethical dilemma weighed heavily. When does compassion cross the line into interference? Nature's balance was precarious. Survival often meant making hard choices without guarantees. Elena wrestled with the tension between honoring wildness and offering a lifeline to a creature silently fading away. Could she hold both compassion and respect in her hands without breaking the fragile trust of the desert? Her friend and colleague, Javier, a seasoned wildlife biologist, had voiced his concerns gently but firmly. Sometimes, Elena, stepping in changes more than one life. We must be sure it's the right time, the right way. Their conversations had become a delicate dance of ideas, science and emotion entwined, each challenging and shaping the other. Javier's pragmatic caution grounded Elena's hopeful instincts, reminding her that every rescue carried consequences. As evening settled in, the desert cooled, the scent of creosote rising anew with the promise of a rare breeze. Elena stepped outside, the rough earth cool beneath her boots. Her gaze swept the horizon, searching the shadows where the kitten might hide. Though unseen, the presence of that fragile life lingered, a whisper carried on the wind, a silent plea she could not ignore. Her mind returned to memories of her brother, the laughter now gone, the empty chair at family dinners, the quiet moments of shared hope that sometimes felt so distant. Helping this kitten, she realized, was more than a duty. It was a way to mend her own brokenness, to find meaning in the silent struggles that bound them both. In this ordinary human moment, far from heroics or grand gestures, Elena's heart opened to a silent promise to watch, to wait, and when the time was right, to offer a hand without breaking the wild spirit she so deeply revered. Have you ever felt drawn to care for another in their quiet suffering, to balance hope with restraint, love with respect? Elena's journey reminds us that everyday compassion, rooted in humility and patience, can become a powerful force for healing. As the first stars twinkled above the desert canopy, a small movement caught Elena's eye, a flicker of tawny fur against the rocky terrain. The bobcat kitten was near, unseen but unmistakably present. The quiet bond had begun. The sun had slipped beneath the horizon, leaving the Sonoran desert bathed in the soft indigo of twilight. The air cooled rapidly, carrying with it the faint scent of creosote and the distant rhythmic chirping of crickets awakening for the night. Shadows stretched long and thin across the rugged landscape, turning familiar shapes into mysterious forms. In this half-light, the desert seemed to hold its breath, suspended between day's harshness and night's cool reprieve. Elena stood at the edge of a dry wash, her silhouette blending with the muted earth tones of the desert floor. Her eyes scanned the uneven terrain, alert to every subtle shift. She had tracked faint paw prints in the dusty soil, evidence of the bobcat kitten's cautious wanderings, and listened for the slightest rustle of movement. But the kitten, wary and diminished, remained just beyond reach, a ghost in the dimming light. From a small rocky outcrop not far away, the kitten watched in return. His amber eyes glimmered with equal parts curiosity and caution as they caught the flicker of Elena's figure. He remained still, his slender body low against the earth, ears swiveling to catch any sound beyond the steady beat of his own racing heart. Though instinct warned him to flee, something about this human's quiet presence stirred a hesitant curiosity. The distance between them was filled with unspoken tension, a fragile space where trust and fear mingled. The kitten's body language told a story, tail twitching subtly, muscles tense but unmoving, nose lifted slightly as he took in Elena's scent, carried by the gentle evening breeze. Each sensed the other's watchfulness, separated by species, yet drawn together by shared need. Biologically, bobcats are naturally cautious creatures, especially young kittens who rely heavily on stealth to avoid predators. The kitten's hesitation was not just fear, but an instinctual survival strategy, a delicate balance between vigilance and the desperate need for connection. He assessed Elena silently, deciding whether this presence was threat or sanctuary. Elena, too, was caught in a moment of quiet assessment. Her mind traced the ethical boundaries she had pondered so often, how to approach without frightening, how to offer care without overstepping the natural order. Her heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the desert night, grounding her in patience and respect. No words passed between them. Instead, a subtle conversation unfolded through body language and stillness. Elena's slow, deliberate breaths mirrored the kitten's measured movements. Her gentle stance, open, unthreatening, invited trust without forcing it. The kitten's narrowed eyes softened, his body relaxing fractionally as he weighed the promise in this silent exchange. Around them, the desert came alive with sounds of night. A distant coyote howled, a bat skimmed low through the cool air, and the stars began to punctuate the sky with their ancient light. The scene held an almost sacred quiet, a shared moment bridging the divide between wild and human, vulnerability and hope. Anticipation hung in the air, heavy yet fragile. This near encounter was the first true connection between two beings bound by the same relentless desire, to be seen, to be understood, to survive. Neither rushed the moment. Instead, they lingered in the space between hesitation and trust, each waiting for the other to take the next step. Have you ever experienced a moment where words were unnecessary, where silence spoke volumes and understanding blossomed in stillness? This meeting, delicate and profound, marked the beginning of a fragile bond that would grow through patience, respect, and shared resilience. In the heart of the desert night, the bobcat kitten chose to watch, not flee, and Elena chose to wait, not reach. The desert held its breath beneath a sky painted with the soft hues of dawn. Pale gold and tender pinks stretched across the horizon, casting a gentle light that softened the harsh edges of the rugged landscape. The air was cool, carrying the fresh scent of mesquite blossoms, awakening after a rare night breeze. In this tranquil moment, time seemed to pause, allowing two solitary souls to bridge the space between their worlds. Elena knelt quietly by a cluster of sun-warmed rocks, a small bowl of specially prepared kitten formula resting beside her. Her eyes, soft and steady, were fixed not on the bowl, but on the shadow flickering just beyond the sparse brush. The bobcat kitten lingered at the edge of her presence, muscles taut, eyes wide with a cautious curiosity that trembled between fear and hope. For a long moment they regarded each other in silence. No sudden movements disturbed the fragile balance. The kitten's tail flicked once, a delicate signal of tentative trust, while Elena's breath slowed to a calm, rhythmic whisper. In the language of stillness, a profound understanding passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement of shared need and silent promise. This was the moment when the fragile barrier between human and wild creature softened, when instinct met intention, and when trust first took root in the arid soil of the desert. The kitten stepped forward with careful hesitation, nose twitching as he sniffed the air near the offering. He did not reach immediately for the food. Instead, he paused, meeting Elena's gaze with eyes that seemed to ask a silent question. "Will you be here when I need you?" Elena's heart tightened with a mixture of hope and reverence. She understood the weight of this choice, that the kitten's acceptance was not a surrender, but an act of courage. Her hand remained still, open and inviting, a promise rather than a demand. In this shared quiet she felt the echo of her own vulnerability, the silent wounds she carried beneath her calm exterior. Biologically, bobcat kittens begin to learn the delicate dance of predator and prey at this stage, balancing curiosity with caution. The kitten's behavior was a blend of innate wariness and an emerging recognition that this human presence might mean safety rather than threat. His decision to approach was a testament to the agile thread of trust that had been carefully woven in these quiet moments. Around them, the desert seemed to hum with life. The first birds of morning trilled their songs, while the gentle rustle of leaves whispered ancient secrets. Light spilled over the landscape like a benediction, illuminating the kitten's soft fur and Elena's thoughtful face. It was as if nature itself bore witness to this fragile bond forming, a silent covenant between two beings shaped by hardship and hope. Have you ever shared a moment so profound it needed no words? A connection so complete it bridged worlds. This was such a moment, a stillness filled with the promise of healing, understanding, and mutual respect. Elena reached slowly toward the bowl, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The kitten watched, muscles coiled, but trust blossoming. When he finally dipped his head to drink, it was more than nourishment. It was an acceptance, a quiet vow that this fragile dance of care and respect would continue. This moment was the pinnacle of their shared journey so far, the moment when silent suffering began to yield to the possibility of hope. Here, in the desert's soft morning light, trust was no longer just a distant hope, but a tangible presence. If you've ever experienced a moment of perfect understanding with an animal, subscribe now to join others who believe connection transcends words. Tell me in the comments, what's the most profound moment you've shared with an animal? The desert's ancient pulse continued beneath the rising sun, carrying with it the quiet promise of transformation. The late morning sun hung heavy and relentless over the Sonoran desert, its rays transforming the landscape into a shimmering mosaic of heat and shadow. Elena sat quietly beneath the sparse shade of a palo verde tree, her hands folded in her lap as she wrestled with a storm of thoughts swirling within her. Arsara. Around her, the desert buzzed faintly with the steady hum of cicadas and the occasional call of a distant raven, a soundtrack both ancient and unyielding. Her mind replayed the moment of trust, a fragile thread woven between herself and the bobcat kitten. That hesitant acceptance, that small step toward connection, weighed on her heart with a mixture of hope and deep uncertainty. She had made a decision, a commitment to help, to intervene, but the path ahead was clouded with complexity. Elena understood the delicate balance she was about to disrupt. Wild animal intervention was never a choice made lightly. She thought of Javier, the wildlife biologist, whose cautious warnings echoed in her memory. "Interference can sometimes do more harm than good," he had said softly during their last conversation. The tension between scientific protocol and heartfelt compassion laid bare. Was she risking the very independence and wildness that defined this kitten's existence? Was her desire to help rooted in genuine need, or in the quiet ache of her own loneliness? The ethical dilemma pressed upon her like the desert sun, inescapable and relentless. Nature's course was often brutal, but it was also balanced and wise. Yet here was this small life, weakening by the day, caught in a slow, silent struggle that seemed to demand more than observation. Could she stand aside? Could she watch helplessly as the hunger gnawed deeper, as the desert tightened its grip? Her breath caught as she imagined the kitten alone in the vast expanse, fragile and fading. This was more than a rescue. It was a reckoning with her own fears and hopes. To commit meant opening herself to the possibility of failure, of heartbreak, of blurring the line between caregiver and captor. Preparation began with quiet urgency. Elena gathered supplies, hydration fluids, nutrient formulas, medical equipment, laying them out with careful precision. Each item symbolized a promise to act, to offer care without domination, to tread lightly on the wild spirit she hoped to preserve. The desert outside was unchanging, but within her, a fierce determination ignited. She thought of the nights spent wrestling with grief, the hollow spaces left by loss, and how this fragile creature's silent fight mirrored her own. Their paths, though vastly different, were intertwined by shared resilience and a longing for healing. Yet the voice of caution remained, embodied by Javier's steadfast presence. When she shared her plans, he listened with measured skepticism. "We must respect the boundaries of nature," he said. "But if intervention is necessary, it must be done with full awareness of the consequences." Their dialogue was not conflict, but a balancing act, a conversation rooted in respect for both science and compassion. Elena's heart wavered, but did not break. She embraced the paradox of her role, the healer who must sometimes watch and wait, the protector who must sometimes let go. The moral complexity was not a burden, but a compass, guiding her through uncertainty. As the desert sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the cracked earth, Elena steeled herself. The decision to help was no longer abstract. It was an unfolding reality. Her commitment was an act of courage, a quiet heroism born not of grand gestures, but of steady, compassionate presence. Have you ever faced a choice where every path seemed fraught with risk, yet the call to care was impossible to ignore? Elena's story reminds us that sometimes the bravest step is to embrace complexity and walk forward with an open heart. In the heart of the desert's unforgiving heat, a fragile bond awaited its next chapter, a chapter forged in struggle, trust, and the hope that healing can arise from even the most uncertain beginnings. The sun hung low now, casting a golden haze over the desert as the late afternoon unfolded with a quiet intensity. Elena moved slowly through the familiar scrubland, each step measured and deliberate, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of the arid landscape. The soft crunch of her boots against the dry earth blended with the distant calls of javelinas and the rustle of brittle leaves stirred by a faint breeze. The air held the warmth of the day's heat, tempered by the cooling promise of evening. Nearby, the bobcat kitten crouched low beneath a mesquite tree, his amber eyes flickering with wary caution. His body was tense, muscles coiled like a tightly wound spring, every sense alert to the presence he sensed but could not yet fully trust. The past days had been marked by invisible struggles, the slow hunger, the aching fatigue, but now something different hovered in the air, the possibility of connection. Elena knelt down, placing a small bowl of nutrient-rich formula on the ground before retreating a few steps. Her hands were steady, but her heart quickened with a mix of hope and apprehension. She knew this moment was fragile. The kitten's trust could not be rushed or forced. Each inch gained would be hard-won, earned through patience and respect. The kitten's nose twitched as he cautiously approached the offering, pausing just short of the bowl. He sniffed the air, detecting Elena's scent mingled with the faint trace of desert blooms. His ears flicked backward, a sign of uncertainty, but hunger nudged him forward. Slowly, tentatively, he lowered his head and lapped at the formula, his tongue gentle and careful. This small act was a monumental step, a silent acceptance of help and a tentative surrender to trust. Elena watched without moving, letting the kitten set the pace. Their shared silence spoke volumes, a delicate conversation beyond words. Yet the bond was not without its challenges. The kitten flinched when Elena reached out to stroke his fur, a sharp reminder of his wild instincts and the scars etched into his being by hardship. His muscles tensed, eyes flashing with mistrust before softening once more. Healing, Elena knew, was a winding path marked by setbacks and breakthroughs. Biologically, bobcats at this stage of development rely heavily on their mother's guidance to learn hunting and survival skills. Separation, especially in a drought-stricken environment, leaves kittens vulnerable not just physically, but emotionally. The kitten's cautious acceptance of Elena's care was a testament to the slow, fragile process of building trust across the divide of species and experience. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with hues of orange and violet, Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her. This was no simple rescue. It was a journey of mutual learning and delicate balance. She was not just tending to a wounded body, but nurturing a fragile spirit. Setbacks came swiftly. A sudden tremor in the kitten's small frame, a brief refusal of food, moments of restlessness that spoke of deep unease. Elena responded with gentle patience, adjusting her approach, learning to read the subtle language of his body and eyes. Each challenge deepened her resolve and widened their fragile connection. Around them, the desert night began to bloom with life. The soft chirp of crickets, the distant howl of coyotes, and the whisper of wind through creosote leaves wove a quiet tapestry that surrounded their unfolding story. In this shared space, between wildness and care, the first seeds of healing took root. Have you ever taken a tentative step into the unknown, trusting despite fear and uncertainty? This kitten's journey, and Elena's, reminds us that trust is earned slowly, often through small acts of patience and presence. Together, in the heart of the desert's fading light, they took the first steps toward a bond that could heal both the silent wounds. The desert morning unfurled slowly, casting a gentle glow over the rugged landscape. A cool breeze stirred the brittle leaves of the mesquite trees, carrying with it the faint, earthy scent of sun-warmed soil. The heat of the previous day had softened into something more forgiving, and the soft light played across the bobcat kitten's tawny fur as he lay nestled in a shallow dip beneath a rocky ledge. Here, sheltered from the harsh sun, his breathing was steadier, though his body still bore the delicate marks of his slow struggle. Over the past weeks, the kitten's fragile frame had begun to show signs of recovery. His eyes, once dulled by exhaustion, now sparkled with cautious curiosity. Muscles that had weakened were slowly regaining strength, and the sharpness of his senses sharpened with each tentative step he took. But healing, Elena knew, was neither linear nor guaranteed. There were days when setbacks cast shadows over their progress, reminding them both of the precarious balance between hope and loss. The kitten's movements were still careful, each step measured as if testing his own limits. He explored the small enclosure Elena had prepared, a safe space mimicking the textures and scents of his wild home. Cracks in sun-baked earth, scattered stones, and sparse vegetation offered subtle cues, encouraging the instincts that had been dulled by hunger and weakness. His ears twitched at the rustle of a nearby brush, his gaze sharp as he tracked an imaginary prey in the cool morning air. Biologically, the recovery of a young bobcat from malnutrition involves not only regaining weight, but the gradual restoration of coordination and stamina. Elena monitored his progress closely, noting the steady return of his hunting reflexes, the flick of his paw, the crouch before a leap, the focused intensity in his eyes. Each milestone was a fragile victory, celebrated in quiet moment. Gnats that held more meaning than words could express. Yet, healing was punctuated by challenges. A sudden fever one evening sent Elena into a flurry of careful care, adjusting fluids and warmth as she tended to the kitten's fragile body. On other days, the kitten's anxiety surfaced in restless pacing or sudden flinches at familiar sounds. These moments tested Elena's resolve, reminding her that care was as much about patience and presence as it was about medicine. Emotionally, Elena grew alongside the kitten. She learned to listen deeply, not just to his needs, but to the unspoken fears and hopes reflected in his gaze. Each day spent in his company chipped away at her own loneliness, replacing grief with purpose. The silent bond between them deepened, woven through shared stillness, gentle touch, and the mutual act of survival. The desert around them mirrored this journey. Autumn's subtle arrival softened the harshness, cooler nights, the scent of creosote after rare rains, and the first hints of fading greens in the scrub brush. The landscape, like the kitten, was in a slow dance of renewal, fragile yet determined. Have you ever witnessed healing that unfolds in quiet, imperfect moments? A process marked by both setbacks and breakthroughs. This story reminds us that recovery is rarely swift or smooth. It is a mosaic of small, steady steps taken with care and hope. As the sun rose higher, bathing the desert in warm light, the bobcat kitten crouched low, ears twitching with renewed alertness. His body was still small, still marked by hardship, but his spirit stirred anew, a fragile flame brightening in the vast, enduring desert. Together, in this shared journey of healing, both kitten and caregiver faced the uncertainty of tomorrow with quiet courage and an unspoken promise to endure. The desert afternoon unfolded with a soft, golden light that seemed to caress the land at sea. Puff, a light that filtered gently through the swaying branches of the mesquite and painted the sandy earth with warm hues of amber and rose. Elena stood quietly by the enclosure, her gaze fixed on the bobcat kitten, now moving with a grace and confidence that had once seemed impossible. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. A creature once fragile and wary now embodied the fierce, silent strength of the desert itself. The kitten's amber eyes sparkled with a renewed sharpness, reflecting not just survival, but a burgeoning vitality. His muscles flexed beneath tawny fur that gleamed in the sunlight. Sleek and strong, the soft scar of weakness fading into memory. He stalked the enclosure with renewed purpose, ears alert, tail flicking with quiet excitement as he practiced the instincts that defined his wild heritage. This transformation was not merely physical. Elena saw it in the kitten's demeanor, the way his cautious glances had softened into steady gazes of curiosity and trust. Where once there had been hesitation and fear, there was now a quiet assurance, a bond forged through patient care and mutual respect. The kitten's journey mirrored Elena's own path, from loss and uncertainty to healing and hope. Biologically, this stage marked a critical turning point. The kitten's growing independence reflected the successful restoration of his strength, coordination, and confidence, key factors for survival once returned to the wild. His hunting reflexes sharpened, and his playful energy returned, signaling a readiness to face the challenges beyond the safety of human care. Elena knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his sleek coat, a touch filled with both pride and reverence. She felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of joy and bittersweet anticipation. This bond, born of shared struggle and silent understanding, had changed her as deeply as it had changed him. She was no longer just a caregiver. She was a witness to the profound resilience of life and the healing power of presence. Yet beneath this peaceful transformation lay the knowledge that release was inevitable. The desert called to the kitten, as it called to all who belonged to its vast, untamed expanse. Elena's heart ached at the thought of letting go, but she knew that true care meant honoring the wildness that defined him. The ethical complexities of human intervention echoed softly in her mind, the delicate balance between protection and freedom, between love and respect for nature's course. This was a moment of profound reckoning, a testament to the quiet courage it took to heal without holding too tightly. The desert around them shimmered with life. A hawk circled high above, its cry piercing the still air. Wildflowers nodded gently in a breeze scented with creosote, and distant mountains stood sentinel against a sky melting into soft dusk. The world moved on, vast and indifferent, yet intimately connected through moments like this, moments where transformation whispered its quiet truth. Have you ever experienced a change so deep it reshaped your understanding of yourself and the world? Elena's story and the Bobcat kitten's journey remind us that transformation often happens not in loud declarations, but in stillness, patience, and shared vulnerability. If you've ever witnessed or felt a profound transformation, subscribe now to join others who believe in the power of silent healing. Tell me in the comments, how has an animal or nature changed you in unexpected ways? As twilight deepened, the kitten curled at Elena's feet, a living emblem of hope renewed, ready to face the wild beyond, forever changed by the gentle hands that had helped him find his strength. Dawn broke slowly over the Sonoran desert, painting the sky with soft hues of rose and gold that spilled gently across the rugged landscape. The cool morning air carried the crisp scent of creosote and the faint, lingering sweetness of desert blooms. Awakened by a recent rare rain, shadows lengthened and softened, wrapping the earth in a tender embrace that whispered of both endings and new beginnings. On a rocky ridge overlooking the vast expanse of the desert, the bobcat kitten stood poised, his amber eyes scanning the horizon with the quiet confidence of one who had reclaimed his place in the wild. His sleek fur gleamed in the early light, muscles taut and ready, proof of the slow, patient journey from frailty to strength. Yet amid the fierce independence that defined him, there was something more, a lingering connection, a silent tether to the woman who had nurtured his fragile life. Elena watched from a distance, her breath catching in her throat as she observed the small creature who had come to embody so much more than survival. The bond forged in silence and trust now faced its ultimate test, release. She understood the sacredness of this moment, the bittersweet ache of letting go, and the profound respect it demanded. The kitten turned slowly, ears flicking toward her, eyes meeting hers in a gaze that carried volumes, recognition, gratitude, and a final, wordless farewell. In that brief, powerful glance, time seemed to stretch and still, folding their shared journey into a single, luminous instant. It was the moment where two worlds, wild and human, independence and compassion, bridged across the silent desert air. Biologically, bobcats at this stage are fully prepared to navigate the challenges of the wild. Their survival depends on sharp instincts, learned skills, and an unyielding connection to the land. This last look back was not a hesitation, but a conscious choice, a quiet acknowledgement of all that had passed, and a readiness to embrace what lay ahead. Elena's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow, hope and gratitude. She knew this goodbye was not an end, but a beginning, a release that honored the wild spirit of the kitten and the deep bond that would remain forever etched in memory. The desert around them awoke fully now, alive with the morning. Chorus of birdsong and the gentle rustling of leaves. The light deepened, promising warmth and life, carrying the stories of countless creatures who, like the kitten, had faced hardship and emerged transformed. Have you ever said goodbye to something or someone you loved, knowing that letting go was the greatest act of love? This final moment reminds us that true connection transcends presence. It lives on in memory, in spirit, and in the quiet spaces between. As the bobcat kitten disappeared into the wild embrace of the desert, Elena turned slowly, her steps light but steady. The lessons of trust, patience, and silent healing would guide her forever, a testament to the power of seeing and being seen. What silent bond in your life has changed you forever? Share your story in the comments, and remember, the quietest moments often hold the deepest truths.